Hello YouTube, this is Christian coming to you with another series of knife reviews, and this weekend on the table there's three knives. I've got the Worsted Nightshade, the Petrified Fish Havrog, and the M8 Miguron Clear. This particular review is going to be about the Petrified Fish Havrog, and feel free, if you're interested in one of the other knives, then just browse through my content and the review should be available this weekend for you. Now, Petrified Fish is another Chinese manufacturer, and they have a couple of interesting knives that are a little bit off the beaten track in terms of shape, and they're very budget friendly, to say the very least. And I had a number of them. I had a beluga, I had a bunta and a mini beluga, and all of these have been rather impressive in terms of fit and finish for the given price point. And when I saw this one, I was straight away attracted a little bit by the shape, because I've been a huge fan of the now discontinued CVV pintail. And you can see there's a lot of similarities there, and I have to say that while I did love the pintail, I always found it is a tiny bit short for my taste, a little bit too stubby on the handle. It is a nice compact knife in S35 VN steel with a nice slicey hollow grind, which makes it an awesome slicer with a very, very fine and thin blade. And as you can see, this is for me kind of a pintail style knife that is a little bit bigger, which I thought would fit my needs a little bit better. However, if you just go by the side-on profile, you would be deceived, because this knife comes with an incredibly thick 4mm steel. By the way, the steel on this blade is K110. It's not something you see a lot of, or a name that you don't hear that much in the knife community, but people who got knives from Petrified Fish before will know it. It's a bowler's version of D2 steel, and D2 is a household name for most people, especially those who look for beater knives or knives that are a little bit more budget friendly. D2 is a great edge retaining tool steel. Doesn't have all that great stainless properties, so corrosion resistance is not quite up there. It does have a decent amount of chromium content, but not enough to qualify it to be a stainless steel, and it will stain and rust, so you gotta look after your D2 and K110 steels a little bit more in terms of giving it a light rub with oil periodically, like in the olden days, especially if you're in a humid or in an area that is close to the ocean. You would kind of want to look after your D2 steel. Now, this is a 3.14 inch blade, so it's on the stubby side, but in relation to the handle, or rather the handle in relation, is rather comfortable and large. And as you already could tell just looking at the thickness of this particular knife, it is on the rather hefty side, especially if we compare it to the carry profile of something along the lines of a CVV pintail. So there's a fair bit of thickness there, and you can see it carries a little bit more heft. And it's interesting mostly because everything in the knife world at the moment seems to be focused on sliciness. So you see all these new knives coming out all the time, and in most cases it's about how slicey is it. Now, it is courageous in this particular case because this knife isn't made for this. Obviously, it isn't. So you can see its carry profile is rather thick. And while that might be a turn off for a lot of people, if I was to use this in a more outdoorsy environment, I would say this is great because the additional thickness of the handle actually gives you something meaningful to hold on to, especially for slightly harder cutting tasks. So that is, in this particular case, actually appreciated. Yes, it's not going to ride in your pocket quite as comfortably as a pintail or a thinner knife, but it gives you that amount of sturdiness that says, well, I can do a little bit more than slice cardboard or cut the odd rope. And you get, with a thicker plate stock, you get a nice and sturdy tip, and the flat grind gives you enough sliciness for the occasional slicing task. That's certainly not a knife that you would want to be using for cutting cardboard all day. There's just better options out there. But if you carry it as an EDC knife and you just don't know what kind of task rolls your way, then this is an interesting design concept and a deviation from what people would consider to be a good knife these days. And I say, yeah, that's refreshing. That's a different concept. I kind of like that. As far as ergonomics are concerned, it's a green micarta handle in this case, and they have a little bit of a organic milling, contouring going on the scales. That really is, entirely up to you whether you like this kind of ornament on your scales or not. Personally, I don't mind it too much. I'm neutral. I don't dislike it, but it doesn't pull me off the socks either. So that's all right. It, however, provides a good grip and overall a good feeling in hand. Another interesting bit they did is they didn't go for traditional thumb studs, but rather have these micarta. I think it's more G-Muscus, so it's a textured G10. Let's see if we can get that to focus right there. Yep. So it's a textured G10, and they have that little step milling going on that, and that works really well in terms of deploying it. Action is super smooth, and also you're coming back into battery. The closing mechanism just works fine. Absolutely no issues with that. The action is dialed in and really, really good. One of the things in a modern knife that I'm having a hard time getting my head around, and you can see it in a lot of other knives as well, is just really bang my head. I can't get my head around why some manufacturers can't pay attention to the transition point between the plate and the handle in the closed state. This is just a little bit of an aesthetical annoyance, right? They spend so much time looking at the transition between the scales and the plate, and you can see they find the sweet spot there for the stop pin to actually give you a really nice contour on this end, and on that you have that ugly step in there. And there's knives where that is far more pronounced, granted, but it wouldn't have taken much to mitigate that away, and that little eyesore would have been dealt with. So that's a bit of a missed opportunity to complete a design that otherwise is actually making sense in a lot of ways. As far as reverse flicking is concerned, you won't have an issue with that either, so that works fine. Also on this knife you only have right hand carry tip up, There's no provision whatsoever for lefties. Yeah, well, that's not affecting me, but I think it would have been nice to have that. And refreshing, on the other hand, is the fact that they're providing, at a very attractive price point, they're providing a milled pocket clip. So, and a good looking one for that. There's nothing wrong with that one. Goes in and out of the pocket, absolutely functional, complements the knife in terms of overall design. So personally, I feel that is a good choice. Then you have your micarta backspacer in there, and a little lanyard hole, which is always appreciated as far as I'm concerned. Looking at the jimping on the blade, that is not ideal. So it is, you can see the flats, the high spots on that jimping, they're just a little bit too wide, so they don't provide you with enough of a sharp edge at the top there to do anything meaningful, which is kind of alright, because you do have a natural ramp here, so no matter where you hold the knife, whether you go full back on it, your thumb automatically wants to come to a rest here. If you choke up on it, your position on your thumb changes with it, so you're just moving your thumb from a more backward position to a more forward position, but you're still sitting on this ramp here, and that is nice and functional. If you cut a little bit more this way, you can use that side of the ramp to once again tuck the knife back into your hand, and all of that are ergonomic features that are appreciated. The finger choil, sharpening choil, is okay. I feel the plunge grind is a little bit generous. A sharper plunge grind would have taken the thick material section of this plunge grind a little bit further towards the pivot, would have given you more sharpenings out of this particular blade. But that being said, I've seen far worse for a lot more money, and so that's not a lot really to complain about in this particular case. One thing that I would like to point out is that in relation to the blade geometry, your thumb stud, especially because it's such a wide one, is sitting a little bit far forward in terms of cutting path. That being said, remember what I said earlier, you do have a knife here that is not necessarily intended. I can see from a design perspective, stock plate thickness, kind of grind, tip geometry, handle thickness. This is more of an outdoorsy knife, so it's not your cardboard slicer, and you can see that you lose about that much of the blade just because you can't slice through material with that part of the blade because it is blocked by the thumb stud, right? And that is perhaps not an ideal design choice, right? If you compare it, let's say, with the Civivi Pintail, just to give you a rough idea, which is a slicer, it has always been, with that knife, a point of contemplation to say, well, look, this is in the cutting path, that's not ideal. It didn't stop me from using the knife, but, you know, just saying. If you look at a Chavez, for instance, right, and you look at the geometry here, you can tell, I'll push it a bit over to make it fair and square, you can see it's not a big issue, right, if you compare it to that. So that's a bit of a design lesson perhaps for petrified fish, just something to consider, whether that knife perhaps would be better served with a thumb hole configuration. Perhaps, I mean, you have thicker scales, so it's a little bit harder to reach in there, but for whatever it's worth, if you're not intending to use it as a slicer as much, then it won't bother you much, because it's a relatively nice and sturdy blade that would do well, from what I can see, in an outdoor kind of scenario. And for that, I really like it. One last thing to talk about perhaps is lock bar access, and in this case too, it is helped by the fact that you have a rather wide knife, so you have a bit of space due to the plate thickness, and also the spacing in between the plate and the scale is rather generous by comparison. There's a fair gap there, which helps it getting your thumb in, but they also set back on the presentation side. The scale is set back enough to give you comfortable access into the lock bar area. So you can see down there the black segment is about how much space you have, and then they chamfered your liner there in a meaningful way, so you get in there no trouble whatsoever to close the knife. So that's just comfortable in terms of using the knife. There's nothing wrong with that. I just recently had a V Elementum, which is a far more expensive, more exclusive, more refined, time-tested design, and we didn't get it right. They just made an incredibly bad lock bar access. Here's a $40 knife for you, you know, and it's fine. It's good, and it doesn't bother anybody really that your presentation scale is sitting a little bit further back. So all good on that end. So overall, a very positive experience with this particular knife. If you don't buy it for the purpose of having a slicer, I would say it's a very capable outdoor knife that yeah, I can recommend as a knife. But I'm gonna put a little bit of a caveat on here, because when I ordered this knife, I ordered another 3 knives in the same package from Petrified Fish, knives I was interested in, and their customer service, I have to say, was not very good. Right, so Petrified Fish doesn't have a distributor here in New Zealand, neither does Kaiser. There's quite a few companies that I have to get out of China directly, and unfortunately a lot of them decide to offer free shipping through Post NL shipping service. So I'm not entirely sure what happened. I received the knives, or the knife, which were supposed to be 4, but 3 were removed out of their package, and I only received that one, and the other ones went missing. All the packaging, all the accessories, everything still was in the main package, but the knives were removed. I can tell it wasn't customs that removed anything, because by law in New Zealand they are required to actually notify you with a note and what they actually removed from the package when they send it through to you, and I had that happening to me before. But in this particular case, that was just opened perhaps and removed, or it wasn't packaged correctly, or they just put packages in there without actually having the knives put into their individual packages. I don't know. But contacting customer services with Petrified Fish, hoping that there would be some kind of insurance for the packages they're sending out, didn't get anything. They were just pretty much deflecting and pointing to 6 or 7 different possibilities how it couldn't have been their fault, and so that was a rather frustrating experience, which is fine. You can go through that. I personally don't have the time to spend you know, 5 or 6 hours on the lines with various shipping companies to find out what exactly happened, just to find out that somebody stole it. I personally think you should have the option, if you're ordering from one of these companies, to have a shipping option that, you know, offers proper insurance for the package, and that perhaps doesn't take 6 weeks to arrive. So that's that. And be a little bit mindful. If you're buying a budget knife, perhaps it is a little bit over the top to expect premium service from a company like that. You are, when you're buying stuff out of China, it hardly ever happened to me, but if they use the wrong freight company, you are at risk of actually losing the goods and not getting your money back, right? It's just something you gotta be aware of. If you have a choice, like if you're living in the United States, as I imagine most of the viewers would be, then buying from your local distributor is certainly a better choice if you decide to go for a Chinese-made knife, right? Other than that, as far as the product itself is concerned, you already heard my extensive opinion on that one, which is a recommendation, but just be aware it's not a slicer, right? And you shouldn't be getting it for that. There's plenty of other reasons to buy it. And for that, I say Petrified Fish, rather a nice job on this one, and I like it. All right, so looking forward to see you on my channel again, and hope you all have a good weekend. Thank you. Bye bye.